The mall was buzzing with its usual midday energy. The sound of shoes clicking on the tile floors, the hum of voices in conversation, the faint ring of cash registers all blended into the background noise of everyday life. Shoppers moved in and out of stores, some carrying bags full of new purchases, others walking with the purpose of simply passing through. The air smelled faintly of coffee from a nearby cafe and the buttery scent of mall pretzels. But none of that mattered to Malik at that moment. Stay with us to see what unfolds next. Malik had just turned 15, but in a crowd like this, he felt small. His clothes, a bit too big, were hand-me-downs from his older brother, and they didn't quite fit right. His sneakers, scuffed from weeks of wear, were nothing special, but none of it bothered him. He was used to it. He wasn't trying to stand out, just a regular kid, grabbing a snack after school before heading home. Today was supposed to be like any other day. He found a seat by the food court, unwrapping his sandwich with one hand while pulling out his phone with the other, checking for any text from his dad. But there were none. His dad, Marcus Wright, had a busy life, a big name, lots of meetings, always on the go. But he never missed a chance to check in with Malik. "I got a meeting today. Don't forget you've got school tomorrow," his dad had texted that morning. But no texts came now. Malik sighed, taking a bite of his sandwich and letting his mind wander. It was just one of those normal afternoons. But all that would change in an instant. "Hey, you there." The voice rang out, sharp and commanding, cutting through the hum of the crowd. Malik froze, his hand stilling as he looked up. His heart skipped a beat. A tall, broad-shouldered mall security guard was striding toward him, his eyes locked on Malik. The guard's face was hard, almost dismissive, as though Malik was already guilty of something. Malik set the sandwich down, the pit in his stomach growing. Me?" "Yeah, you." The guard's tone was stern, his finger pointing accusingly at Malik. "Come here. Now." Malik swallowed, unsure of what was going on. He had been minding his own business, just sitting at the food court, but something about the guard's body language felt off. The unease in his stomach was growing. He stood up slowly, the crowd around him still oblivious to the tension building. "What's the problem?" he asked, trying to sound calm, but his voice wavered slightly. The guard didn't answer right away. Instead, he eyed Malik suspiciously before saying, "You think you can just take what you want?" His words were sharp, his eyes scanning Malik up and down. "We've got you on camera. You think we don't know?" "Take what?" Malik's confusion deepened. "I haven't stolen anything." The guard's face twisted into a scowl. "Don't play dumb. You think you can walk out of here with something and get away with it?" Malik's stomach sank. "I haven't." Before he could finish, the guard stepped closer, grabbing Malik by the arm with a firm grip. Malik tried to pull away, but the guard was too strong. "Let go of me," Malik protested, his voice trembling now. The guard's grip only tightened. "You're coming with me. We'll sort this out in the back." The mall around them had gone silent, the hum of everyday life fading away as all eyes turned to Malik and the guard. People were watching, but no one moved. No one said anything. Some people had already pulled out their phones, recording what was happening. It felt like everyone in the mall was turning into a silent witness to his humiliation. Malik's heart pounded in his chest, the eyes of the crowd feeling like a weight on his back. This wasn't just about a misunderstanding, it was about being caught, accused, and powerless to fight back. "I didn't do anything," Malik repeated, his voice rising. "You've got the wrong person. I didn't steal anything." But no one was listening. Not the guard, not the crowd. And as they dragged him toward the back of the mall, away from the food court, the silence seemed to follow him like a shadow. The hallway leading to the back office was cold and sterile, the fluorescent lights buzzing above them. Each step Malik took felt heavier than the last, his heart thumping louder with every footfall. The security guard's grip on his arm never loosened as he pulled him along, his fingers digging into Malik's skin like they were trying to break him. Malik wanted to scream. He wanted to fight back, but what good would it do? Who would listen to him in a place like this where everything seemed set up to punish him the moment he stepped out of line? He could hear people whispering as they passed by, some stopping to watch, others avoiding the scene entirely. His stomach churned as he wondered how many of them had already decided what kind of person he was. A thief. "Please, let me go," Malik begged, his voice barely above a whisper. But the guard didn't acknowledge him. The officer guiding him down the hall was silent, his expression unreadable, as if this was all just part of his routine. To him, Malik wasn't a human being, he was just another problem to be dealt with. They reached the small security office, and Malik was shoved into a chair by the door. The officers inside didn't even look up at him. One of them, a man with a thick mustache, was hunched over a computer, typing something that Malik couldn't make out. "Sit tight," the guard said, his voice cold and indifferent as he stepped out of the room. Malik sat there, staring at the beige walls, the fluorescent light flickering above him, making the entire room feel like a cage. His palms were sweating, his heart was racing, his mouth was dry. He could hear the conversation outside the office, the murmurs of people who passed by the room, but none of it felt real. The words stolen and evidence kept ringing in his mind. How could this be happening? Why him? He had never done anything like this in his life. His thoughts were interrupted by the door opening again. This time a woman walked in, short hair, sharp eyes, and a no-nonsense attitude that made her seem like she ran the place. She looked at him for a moment before turning her attention to the computer screen in front of her. "Name?" she asked, her voice clipped and professional. "Malik Wright," he answered, his throat tight. She typed something on the keyboard without looking at him. "Do you know why you're here?" "I didn't steal anything," Malik said quickly, his hands clenched into fists on his lap. "I was just eating my lunch, and—" "You were seen taking something," she interrupted, still not looking up. "And we've got the footage. You don't get to argue with us. Just admit it and make this easy." "I didn't steal anything," Malik repeated, his voice shaking with frustration. He felt his hands begin to sweat, the pressure of the situation growing unbearable. But the woman didn't even flinch. She just glanced at the screen again, then back at Malik with a cold stare. "You're wasting my time," she said flatly. "If you cooperate, this can go a lot smoother. If you don't, we'll be calling the police." Malik's chest tightened. The idea of the police showing up scared him more than anything. He didn't have money for a lawyer, and he knew how quickly things could spiral. They didn't care who he was. They already decided who he was. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. "I swear I didn't take anything. I just bought my snack, and then you came over and—" "Enough," she snapped, her patience wearing thin. "We've seen the footage, Malik. You were caught red-handed. So, either you tell me where the items are or we escalate this." The door opened again, and a man stepped inside, another officer, his face hard. Malik's heart sank. They were closing in on him, and all he could do was sit there, hoping for a miracle. But the miracle didn't come. Instead, the officer looked at Malik like he was a piece of trash, barely worth the time to process. "Kid's guilty. Just admit it, and we can move on." Malik's eyes stung with tears he couldn't hold back. This was too much. He wanted to shout, to cry out that it wasn't fair, that he didn't deserve this, that none of this made sense. But nothing was coming. Not anymore. Malik felt the walls closing in around him as the minutes dragged on. Every second felt like an eternity. The room, which had seemed so ordinary when he first walked in, now felt like a prison. The harsh fluorescent lights above hummed incessantly, amplifying the weight of the silence that filled the space. He shifted in his seat, his hands still trembling in his lap. His mind raced, spinning with thoughts, trying to piece together what was happening. This couldn't be real. It couldn't. His thoughts were broken by the sound of a door opening again. The officer who had been standing by the desk earlier stepped back into the room. This time, though, he wasn't alone. A tall man in a sharply pressed suit entered with an air of authority that seemed to command the entire room. His presence made the already tense atmosphere feel even heavier. "Mr. Wright?" the man asked, his voice low but steady. Malik froze. Mr. Wright? He knew that name, he knew that voice? His heart skipped a beat. The man was his father, Marcus Wright, a well-known businessman, a man whose name carried weight in the city. The Marcus Wright, the same man whose face was plastered on billboards, whose voice was heard in interviews, who had made a fortune building his company from the ground up. But for Malik, Marcus Wright was also the dad who made sure he was always there when it mattered, taking him to his first baseball game, picking him up after school, sending him text messages every morning just to check in. And now here he was, standing in the middle of the sterile room, looking at his son with a mixture of concern and calm that only a parent could have. "Dad," Malik whispered, his voice shaking as the officer beside him stepped back, giving Marcus room. Marcus turned to the officers, his gaze sharp. "What's going on here?" His voice was low but filled with authority. "What's this about?" The officers hesitated. They looked at each other before one of them spoke up. "Your son was caught on camera stealing from the store. He's being uncooperative, refusing to admit his actions." Malik's heart sank as he looked up at his father. How could they think he'd do this? How could they accuse him of something so wrong? Marcus's eyes softened as he turned back to his son. "Malik," he said gently, "you didn't steal anything, right?" Malik nodded quickly, desperate for his father to understand. "No, Dad, I didn't." Marcus cut him off with a raised hand. "I believe you, and I'll make sure they know that too." The air in the room shifted. The security officers, once so sure of themselves, now seemed uncertain, almost nervous. Marcus's presence was like a wave crashing over them, and they were powerless to stop it. The officer who had spoken earlier cleared his throat. "We have the footage," he repeated, but there was a crack in his voice now, as if he too was starting to question what was going on. Marcus didn't flinch. He just took a step forward, his voice dropping but gaining strength with every word. "I don't care about your footage. If my son says he didn't steal, that's enough. You'll let him go now." The officer hesitated again, but Marcus wasn't backing down. "This isn't about the footage. It's about respect, and I demand that you treat my son with respect. Do you understand?" The room was silent for a moment, the tension hanging heavy in the air. The security guard who had grabbed Malik earlier looked down at the floor, his eyes avoiding Marcus's piercing stare. The officer nodded stiffly, but his confidence had cracked. We'll have to review the footage again, but we'll let him go for now." Marcus turned to Malik, his face softening. "Let's get out of here, son." Malik didn't need to be told twice. As soon as his father's words sank in, the weight that had been pressing down on his chest started to lift. His hands, which had been clammy and trembling, relaxed for the first time since the whole ordeal started. The room was thick with tension as Marcus and Malik made their way out of the small office. The security officers, now awkwardly standing by the desk, exchanged uncertain glances. Malik's body still felt stiff from the earlier confrontation, but the presence of his father gave him a strange sense of relief. It was as though, with Marcus by his side, the world couldn't touch him in the same way anymore. But just as they reached the door, the officer who had grabbed Malik earlier stepped forward again. His face was flushed, and his hands fidgeted at his sides as if he were nervous about what was coming next. "Mr. Wright," the officer said, his voice low and shaky, I need to speak with you." Marcus stopped but didn't turn around right away. He didn't have to. The weight of his name, of the power behind his voice, was enough to make the officer stumble over his words. "What is it?" Marcus's voice was cold now, as if he knew exactly what this was about. The officer shifted uncomfortably. "There's been a misunderstanding," he muttered, looking down at the floor. We thought Malik had taken something, but there's a problem with the footage." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his patience wearing thin. "What do you mean, a problem?" The officer took a deep breath before speaking again. "It turns out the footage was tampered with. We didn't check properly. Malik wasn't the one who took the item. It was someone else, and we got it wrong." Malik's jaw dropped, but before he could speak, Marcus stepped in. "You didn't just get it wrong," he said. his voice sharp with indignation. "You accused my son of stealing. You humiliated him in front of everyone in this mall. And now, you're telling me this was all a mistake? A mistake that could have cost him his reputation, his dignity, and maybe worse." The officer stammered, his face pale. "We were sorry, Mr. Wright. It won't happen again." "No, it won't," Marcus replied, his voice low but final. He turned to the other officer in the room. "You will report this. You will file a full report about what happened here, and you'll make sure that what you've done is corrected." The officers were silent, but it was clear that Marcus's words had struck a chord. They knew they couldn't hide behind their excuses any longer. Then, Marcus did something that took everyone by surprise. He turned to Malik and smiled. "Son, this isn't about them making things right. It's about making sure no one gets away with treating people like they're invisible or unworthy of respect. You've got a name, and I'm proud of you for standing your ground." Malik's heart swelled as he looked at his father. For the first time that day, he felt the weight on his shoulders lift. He hadn't been alone. He wasn't invisible. The officers, now visibly uncomfortable, began to file out of the room. Marcus stood by the door and spoke one last time, his voice commanding and firm. "You're lucky this is being handled privately. If this happens again, if anyone accuses my son of anything without cause, you'll regret it. You can count on that." With that, the door shut behind them, and they walked out into the bustling mall, which now seemed like a completely different place. Malik took a deep breath, and for the first time in hours, he felt like himself again. The mall buzzed around them, but Malik wasn't paying attention to the voices, the laughter, or the hustle of everyday shoppers. He was thinking about the moment his father had stepped in and changed everything. He had been accused, humiliated, and pushed to the edge. But in the end, it wasn't just about being right, it was about standing up when no one else would. His father had given him that lesson, and it would stay with him forever. But the real story wasn't over. The story of the wrongful accusation didn't just end with Marcus Wright demanding an apology. The incident went viral. It was shared across social media, and soon news outlets picked up the story. The security guard who had accused Malik faced serious consequences for his actions. An internal investigation was launched, and he was dismissed from his position for lying and falsely accusing an innocent teenager. Malik's story became a reminder to people everywhere that justice doesn't always come easy, but it always comes when people are brave enough to demand it. Sometimes we face moments that make us feel powerless, like we're being treated unfairly for reasons beyond our control. But standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, can change everything. Malik's story teaches us that we don't have to face injustice alone. And when we have someone who believes in us, someone willing to fight for us, no one can take away our dignity. If you believe in standing up for what's right, then hit that subscribe button, like, share, and leave a comment to let us know your thoughts on Malik's journey. What would you have done if you were in his shoes?